impeachment process is a huge decision. It cannot be done on flimsy grounds. There has to be something tangible that you can hold on to before you take that decision.
Ramaphosa was accused by South Africa's former spy chief of covering up a robbery of millions of dollars at one of his properties. Parliament will debate the report next week.
When we announced that today we'll be receiving this report from the panel, independent panel, we then also announced that on the 6th, by the way, even there was consultation with all political parties, and it was agreed to that on the 6th, which is next week, Tuesday, this report will be tabled before the Assembly.
The debate could lead to a potential vote to remove the president who's denied the accusations against him. A two-thirds majority would be needed to impeach him.
I will go through the report as the office of the chief whip and call caucus to brief caucus what is the content of the report. At the moment, we'll be shooting from the dark because we don't know what the report is all about.
The report's filing comes only 2 weeks before the African National Congress, which has been in power since the end of apartheid, convenes to elect a new leader.
All right, let's start this broadcast with a story that is in fact coming from South Africa, where Cyril Ramaphosa's farmgate scandal has rocked the South African politics, and the South African president, according to reports, made a fortune by selling buffaloes. He'd once bid more than 20 million rands on a single buffalo. And that's not all. Ramaphosa, it appears, has a serious liking for buffaloes as well. Made a fortune by buffaloes. Ramaphosa's farmgate scandal has rocked the South African politics. Let's start this broadcast with a story that is in fact coming from South Africa, where Cyril Ramaphosa's farmgate scandal has rocked the South African politics, and the South African president, according to reports, made a... Let's start this broadcast with a story that is in fact coming from South Africa, where Cyril Ramaphosa's farmgate scandal has rocked the South African politics, and the South African president, according to reports, made a fortune by selling buffaloes. He'd once bid more than 20 million rands on a single buffalo. And that's not all. Ramaphosa, it appears, has a serious liking for buffaloes as well. Made a fortune by buffaloes. He'd once bid more than 20 million rands on a single buffalo. And that's not all. Ramaphosa, it appears, has a serious liking for buffaloes as well. And he keeps scores of them in his farm as a part of his business. He also imports them from nearby stations, invests in breeding and nurturing them. The Ramaphosa is now embroiled in a cash and cushion scandal. It's also been described as a farm's gain. He is alleged to have covered a theft of more than $4 million from his phalla farm. The Ramaphosa has been accused of trying to hide the existence of this huge sum of undeclared currency, and according to the president, the money that was stolen was in fact made by selling buffaloes. Ramaphosa had earlier said that he had received...
So how do you become a member at Foundry? Well, to start with, you'd go through our 21-day challenge, which gives you an opportunity.
Ramaphosa had earlier said that he had received a sum of $600,000 in terms of cash for the buffaloes that he had sold. And a total of 13 such buffaloes were in fact reportedly stolen from his farm. Apparently all the cash that he received from selling the buffaloes was stolen from beneath the sofa's cushion, where he had kept the cash himself at his ranch. The South African president now wants everyone to believe the story, and according to Ramaphosa's lawyer, the South African president will challenge Section 89 of the Panel Report, which has declined to believe his account of the phalla break-in case, where robbers had in fact come and they stole the cash. But what is interesting is that the president, who had cash stolen from his farm, did not report it to the police. South Africa's ruling African National Congress will also hold a meeting of its National Executive Committee later in the day today, which will be attended by the South African president himself. And this comes the day after the party's National Working Committee held a meeting in Johannesburg, and the members met to discuss the experts' panel report on Ramaphosa, which found that the president may have violated the oath of his office. The president did not attend the meeting on Sunday, saying that it was in fact up to the National Executive to now decide his future. If the ANC decides to adopt the panel's report, then the Committee of Lawmakers will be constituted to reassess the case against the president. And its findings will then be put forward to the National Assembly, which would vote on how to proceed from here. Impeaching the president will of course require the backing of 2/3 of a majority in the House, and it remains to be seen as to which way the ANC will of course swing on the back of these allegations of serious fraud that have now been leveled against the sitting president of South Africa. Alright, now to give us more insights in terms of what of course is likely to happen in South African politics, we're being joined by Edwin Naidu, who is a political commentator and is joining us live from Cape Town in South Africa. Now, Mr. Naidu, this of course is a very serious case that has rocked South African politics. It's been described as the Farmgate scandal that the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is embroiled in. And a decision given to the start is expected to be taken by his party today. Give us a sense of how his party so far has viewed this case. How much internal support does Cyril Ramaphosa have within his party after these allegations have been made public?
Well, good day, Mohammed. Thanks for that. I think, it was expected that President Ramaphosa would step down on Thursday. In fact, the rumors were very high that he was going to resign. He was, going to pack it in. There was no appetite to fight. But what you saw on Thursday was major intervention by people like the National Chairperson, Wede Matashe, Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, and others who reminded him that the ANC nominated him for the position of president, and he could not stand down without consultation with the National Executive Committee. So I think, remember that Ramaphosa is super wealthy. Unlike his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who has multiple wives, 20 children, he's always the president, and he could not stand down without consultation with the National Executive Committee. So I think, remember that Ramaphosa is super wealthy. Unlike his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who has multiple wives, 20 for the position of president, and he could not stand down without consultation with the National Executive Committee. So I think, remember that Ramaphosa is super wealthy. Unlike his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who has multiple wives, 20 children, he's always broke and needed to keep his hands on the financial levers. But, with Ramaphosa saying that he was going to go with the news spreading, there was huge implications, rapid decline of the currency, with South Africa struggling economically, after the pandemic, you found that there could be another economic crisis. I would say that the party rallied. There was huge implications, rapid decline of the currency, with South Africa struggling economically, after the pandemic, you found that there could be another economic crisis. I would say that the party rallied together and spoke to Ramaphosa and said, you can't leave now, before the major elections take place in 2 weeks' time for new leadership. They didn't want him to hand over party, so it was to stay on, and that convinced him and made him change his mind.
All right, very interesting. Now, it remains to be seen as to what decision will, of course, be taken by the ANC in terms of how it wants to proceed with this case. But the question that I want to ask you, Mr. Naidu, is, going into these elections, which are pretty imminent in South Africa, is Cyril Ramaphosa going to be a liability or a big political asset for the ANC?
Well, I think, it's lesser of the two evils, or lesser of the few evils that you have. You've got him running up against Zweli Mkhize, who himself faced major scandals as health minister, amounting to hundreds of millions of rands that were squandered and siphoned to his family, son, wife, and daughter-in-law. So that's his main rival. His other rival is the former, the current minister of cooperative government, Zuma, the former wife of President Zuma, former President Zuma. And she herself, when is the former, the current minister of cooperative government, Zuma, the former wife of President Zuma, former President Zuma. And she herself, when she was a minister many years ago, I think it was arts, she gave money to a movie that embroiled her in scandal. So each leader is tainted with something. But many people seem to think that Ramaphosa, because he's loved by business, in fact, we've got his critics who say he's aligned to white monopoly capital, white business, and people, they support him because he's very sort of amiable to them. But I think, what this phalla scandal showed is that he actually didn't say much, he didn't do anything. It was just rumors, and the rumors actually made him stronger because when people thought he was going to resign, there was a huge groundswell of support saying, don't resign. But you also had some people who say he must go now because what he did is wrong. And the fact is, when you compare him to the previous president, two wrongs don't make a right. But the fact is, how wrong is he wrong compared to Jacob Zuma's wrong?
That's a question that people in South Africa will decide. But just before we let you go, very quickly, the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa came into the presidency campaign when he was campaigning, he said that he wanted to clean up the South African politics of corruption. But looking at the allegations that have now been leveled against him, do you think he's failed on that front?
I think he definitely has failed because he's breached trust. And I think when you breach trust, you can't convince people to do something when you yourself are tainted. But in his favor, he's definitely gone the extra mile to try and reverse what we call state capture. Something when you yourself are tainted. But in his favor, he's definitely gone the extra mile to try and reverse what we call state capture. The former previous president aligning with the Gupta brothers from India who are now hiding in Dubai. He's tried to make sure that people involved in those, investigations are brought to justice. It hasn't really happened, but I think this has made him stronger in a sense. And remember, the last time he fought this election, it was very close. He beat Dlamini Zuma by just something like 200 votes. So, even that he may still have the strong support of people who are saying, let's, look at this report. According to its merits, he will take it to the Constitutional Court and review. It might make him stronger. He might emerge because they see him as the best bet for South Africa, given that our leadership integrity is there,
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Naidu, for joining us and getting us all those insights there.
Pleasure.
Viewers is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.
7,000 miles from South Africa's seat of power and home to a man who's been...
It's politics. We've been invited to the home of Hazem Mustafa, the Sunnese businessman who has found himself at the heart of what is now known as Farmgate, the political scandal.
7,000 miles from South Africa's seat of power and home to a man who's been...
It's politics. We've been invited to the home of Hazem Mustafa, the Sunnese businessman who has found himself at the heart of what is now known as Farmgate, the political scandal that could see South Africa's president face impeachment proceedings. An independent inquiry recently found that Cyril Ramaphosa may have violated the Constitution after a political rival filed charges of corruption and money laundering. The allegations exposed a secret theft of a large stash of foreign currency from his game farm nearly 3 years ago. Ramaphosa says this man is the source of the cash stashed in the couch. Hazem confirms that he paid $580,000 in cash to buy 20 buffalo from Phalla farm. Ramaphosa says this man is the source of the cash stashed in the couch. Hazem confirms that he paid $580,000 in cash to buy 20 buffalo from Phalla farm. It says because of COVID, they were never exported. And now he and his South African wife are making headlines.
I'm sure why they put it there. Why didn't send it to the bank? It's also questions there.
On the 23rd of December 2019, Hazem lands in Johannesburg with $600,000 in cash. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, he drives to Phalla farm. He hands over $580,000 for 20 buffalo, then leaves South Africa the next day as Ramaphosa arrives. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, he drives to Phalla farm. He hands over $580,000 for 20 buffalo, then leaves South Africa. 3rd of December 2019, Hazem lands in Johannesburg with $600,000 in cash. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, he drives to Phalla farm. He hands over $580,000 for 20 buffalo, then leaves South Africa the next day as Ramaphosa arrives at the farm. Ramaphosa tells staff to deposit the cash, but after he leaves, it's transferred from the safe to the cushions of a couch. According to Ramaphosa, this money was stolen, so the money is no longer there.
Once I gave the money, the ownership of the money has been transferred from me to him. And the receipt is my evidence for the payment. It's by law or by logic sense.
None of this was public knowledge until June of this year. At this point, were you aware that the president was involved in the buffalo sale?
From when I hear the news, yeah, this is the first time to really know that he's the owner. Because if you saw the structure, for the farm, it's belonged to trustee. And this trustee, I think, belonged to his family. There's a copy of the declaration.
Hazem is now cooperating with the South African authorities and says he's handed over his evidence. He shows us the documents, but won't let us film them. So this is a declaration form. Hazem Mustafa Mohammed Ibrahim, OR Tambo International, arrivals A. It's got your date of birth. It's got the time, 23rd of December 2019. You arrived at 5:07 p.m. And you declared $600,000 US. The Farmgate scandal has fractured Ramaphosa's anti-corruption platform and raises questions around his credibility at a critical moment for his party. South Africa's parliament will soon decide whether Ramaphosa will face impeachment proceedings. And as for the man who bought the buffalo, he's ready to take. You arrived at 5:07 p.m. and you declared $600,000 US. The Farmgate scandal has fractured Ramaphosa's anti-corruption platform and raises questions around his credibility at a critical moment for his party. South Africa's parliament will soon decide whether Ramaphosa will face impeachment proceedings. And as for the man who bought the buffalo, he's ready to take the stand.
Anything to help the justice and to show the truth, I'm here. I have nothing to hide.
Back in the safe and not in the couch. Yusuf Al-Bagher, Sky News, Dubai.
Here. I have nothing.
And not stand.
Anything to help the justice and to show the truth, I'm here. I have nothing to hide.
Back in the safe and not in the couch. Yusuf Al-Bagher, Sky News, Dubai.
Break it! Gonna still outside! Hey! Need a dance partner? I've been waiting!